So this is a 2-5 game at Chasers in New Hampshire.
Oh, okay. Good old Chasers. That's a 1K cap buy-in. I know that. And how deep are you guys?
I'm sitting at about 1K. The effective stack is going to be the big blind, who's roughly about 750-ish.
Okay, so 750 effective. Okay.
I have Jack of Spades, ten of clubs in the cutoff is my position.
Okay.
And then pre-flop, this was a limp happy game. So the under the gun limps, and then it folds to me, and I raised to 20 out of the cutoff with the Jack of Spades, ten of clubs
So so under the gun limps, hero raises Jack 10 in the cutoff to what, 20? 25, something like that?
to 20.
To 20. So what I would say here is that when I give a very easy approach to pre-flop on my, my training, Crush Live Poker, of course, the best live training tool out there on the internet. Everyone should check it out there if you haven't. I usually say in limp happy games, because I get this question a lot, how do you approach these limp happy games? And my approach is always, if there's one limp and the guy hasn't been really prone to like doing a lot of limp re-raising, or he's just not a nit, because there are some OMC types, which is old man coffee, which guys will limp in with like ace king, ace queen,
Mhm.
and you have to throw this out the window, but it doesn't sound like that's the situation. I usually ignore the one limp and then I raise the normal hands that I would from that position. So if Jack 10 off, it's probably pretty cuspy in a two blind game. If that's the bottom part of your opening range, I have no problem with the open. Once you get two limps in front, that's when you start. That's when I say you should pull it back and really only ISO the hands that you're going to really open from, say, the first few spots. And sometimes you can throw some over limps in there. I mean, sometimes I deviate from that, but I think that this is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that just because when there are multiple limpers, oftentimes they're going to have Jack 10 off dominated, I'm assuming.
Well, it just means that you don't want to ISO with sort of a non-premium hand when it's going to go multi-way, and the more multi-way it goes, the more showdown prone it's going to be, right?
Okay.
So it's not necessarily the domination. It's just more of you're going to get it. There's more of a chance you won't win, or you're going to get a multi-way. You know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had raised to 20. Button on my left calls. The big blind, who's the effective stack, he calls, and under the gun calls.
Well, that didn't go as planned.
Definitely not.
So one, two, three, what, four ways including you to the flop, right?
Correct. Four ways to the flop.
Okay.
I got the flop right around like 80, $82.
Okay. Yep.
Right. Flop comes out 7, 8, queen, all diamonds.
And you do not have a diamond.
I do not.
Okay. So not a great flop for you. I certainly would not be c betting here.
To be honest, once I saw this flop, and I was kind of like mid conversation, I was already mentally done with this hand. I definitely wasn't planning on c betting. And if somebody, either let out or the button bet on the flop, I was out of this hand.
By the way, I see Low Limit Poker Cash Games podcast in the live chat. I think he said his name was Josh, but I always like to give that guy a shout out. That's a good little podcast to listen to. You can find it in Apple Podcasts. I don't know if you've ever heard that, Jonathan, but it's a decent podcast on specifically low limit cash. But okay,
So the
so
name of the podcast is Low Limit Podcast.
low limit poker.
Low Limit Poker. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Thank
So Queen 8-7 all diamonds. Okay. Yep.
you. All right. Actually checks around on the flop.
Okay. So checked around.
All right.
Yep.
The turn is the nine of spades.
Oh, okay. So you make a straight.
Correct.
Okay.
The big blind bets 35.
Okay.
And this big blind, I had seen him in multiple other hands. He seemed like kind of like, I won't say wild player. That's probably not the right term. He just seemed like none of his bet sizings ever made sense. I seen him in showdown hands where he was like betting the river with like bottom pair, just ridiculous bets.
Okay.
So the under the gun folds,
Mm-hmm.
and I raised to 150.
So I do remember this email. And I would say that sort of the more standard play here would be to call, especially if it seems like it's very, very loosey-goosey here. I mean, I know he's betting 35 into 80, but there are a lot of flushes that the big blind can have. And but on the flip side to this, though, you can make some fairly exploitable, I would say, non-standard plays in situations like this where people won't ever raise back without better and will call down with worse a lot. My only question here is that if you go 150, let's say he just 3-bet jams, are you raise
I'm
fold?
folding.
Really, you're going to raise fold for value here?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody three bets this hand, then I definitely wasn't willing to stack off, knowing that I went four ways on a monotone flop.
Okay, I mean that is definitely something that you can do. You can definitely raise fold in games for value. And one of my favorite hands from Friday, actually, because I feel like I was on point on the Hustler Casino show, was there was a hand where I saw two people make a flush. It was Garrett and this guy Victor, and for whatever reason, the board got checked all the way down. Like they both had flush draws, and it got checked to the end. It was multi-way. And then the flush came, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy because no betting. And then Garrett checked the river, and the other guy had the nut flush. Garrett had like a jack eye flush. And I was like, even before the action, I'm like, Garrett's going to check raise fold here. He's going to check raise fold the river, which is definitely a play that you save for like second and third nuttish types of hands. But you got to be able to be prepared to do it. It just kind of reminds me of this, a little bit. I
I
don't,
did see that hand. That was great.
yeah. I don't hate the play. I'm just saying that it's a little bit more standard to call, but I think that people will underestimate how much you will get called by. So you make it 150 button folds, I assume?
So, well, this is actually, so I actually wanted to talk to you about that, and you kind of already mentioned it. I think this was a pivotal point of the hand, is on the turn, is it probably more optimal to just call because of four ways on a monotone board and flushes are more likely? Or I felt like it was very difficult for somebody to have flop the flush. Obviously, it's possible, but I felt like I was the best hand. Also, if Big Blind did have a flush, I kind of felt like he would have bet bigger as well.
Well, I mean, that could be, but when four cards are out, it makes no I mean, whether or not he flopped a flush or this board didn't come out like this, it came out queen 8-7 with two diamonds, it got checked around, then the turn was the nine of diamonds. It's the still same number of flushes, right? With four cards coming out. Right, it makes no. I mean that math of flopping the flushes is irrelevant. I mean, whether it was it was a two flush on the flop, and it got checked around, and then the third flush card came in, and he has a flush, or he flopped it. It's the same thing, right? With four cards,
Okay, yeah, you're right.
you know what I mean? I mean, yeah. I mean, you could. I don't know. I mean, 35. I wouldn't take too much from that, but actually, the button does the button call, actually, now that I remember
The
this?
button
Oh,
does
that's
call
right.
behind.
Okay. The button calls. Yeah. Oh. It's interesting.
Yeah,
But
I
he
was
didn't
definitely not
but he
expecting
didn't
the
bet the flop though. So that's also interesting, right? The button let it check through.
the button checked behind me on the flop, and then he called my raise on the turn.
Okay. So the button calls. And what does this guy in the big blind do?
He calls.
Boy, that's interesting because like I said, unless the button is really sandbagging something here, you're trying to think of people that like slow play small flop flushes that aren't the nuts. I don't know if they're going to just continue to call here on turn. I guess it's possible. I mean, you actually are showing a lot of strength. If most of the time I would never be in this spot if I'm the button checking through a small flush. If I were for some reason had checked through a small flush like 4 or 5 of diamonds or something like that, and then you raise turn, I'm probably am just going to call because you're representing a lot of strength, and I can kind of see what the river reveals. But the big blind here. I mean, that would be awful trappy to have like the flush and just call here. I mean, he seems like he might be scared, but you've got two people in there. So you go 450 here in on the turn. So it looks like the pot now is 530, right?
Yep, give or take, correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That was my thoughts exactly, to be honest. When the button did call my raise on the turn, I'm thinking, okay, this guy probably has, a small baby flush that he's not willing to stack off just yet, just in case a fourth diamond comes, and he playing it safe, I guess.
I mean, it could be, or he's sandbagging something too. Like he
Okay,
flopped the
yeah.
nuts.
Hmm. And then the river is the three of spades.
Okay.
So this is where the hand takes it to another turn that I wasn't expecting. Big blind leads out for 300.
Wow. 300 into 530, and you've got this guy behind you. Oh, man. I kind of feel like I want to fold here. I mean, here's the reasons why I want to fold here is because not only is he bluffing into two people, but that's a super, super strong action from the guy behind you cold calling. So in order for somebody to not have a flush here, there all kinds of things have to happen here. I mean, the big blind is playing this like almost like he's got the nuts here or something like that. It's just one of these, man. It's just because I mean the big blind would have to bluff given this action of you raising and then the other guy cold calling. You know, say like the big blind had like the ace of diamonds or something like that. That is awfully optimistic, you know, to make that play. And then all those other hands that we were trying to get value from the big blind, like two pair, like it's never going to lead here for 300. You know what I mean? Like yeah, I think I fold here, man. It kind of sucks, but
So I definitely wasn't happy, but I did end up tank folding, just thinking the exact same thing you're thinking is okay, like when is this ever not for value? Maybe he has enough flush and just doesn't want it to get checked around.
by the way, I want to read a comment here from Shalendra Shankar, who says, crying call, opponent could be value betting a set. Again, I just don't. I mean, if you look at the big blind, he led on the turn, got raised by the preflop raiser, got a button flat call. The big blind's just holding on for dear life here if the board doesn't pair, right? He's not going to lead for 300 when nothing has changed. Yeah, that's. I mean, the big blind is either going to have some sort of bluff, which seems suicidal, or going to have a hand that's close to the nuts, most likely the nuts, because I think he would put it in. And then the problem is that not only is this super under bluff, but then what's the button have behind you,
So
too?
I was kind of monkey in the middle, and that's exactly my thinking is like, what if I call and the button jams behind me? I just,
Well, I mean,
I
it's a
just
consideration, right? I mean, it's not, you're not closing the action here. So that's what I'm saying. It's even tougher. So I think, yeah, I think I'm going to fold here. You
that's
know?
it. So I did end up folding begrudgingly.
Uh huh.
The button ends up calling.
Okay. I mean,
Um,
you can't be good here, right?
so the big blind shows ace of diamonds, eight of clubs.
So he's bluffing with the ace of diamonds. Wow, that's insane. Okay. And what does the button have?
Button turned a set of nines, so he called with a set
Oh,
of nines.
God.
And I was beside myself. I was
Oh,
like, how was I
man.
ever good here?
You know what, though? I think I just chalked this up to like, this is a rare, rare time. Sure, there's going to be situations here where you're going to be good. Does it warrant calling given the pot odds? I don't think so. I mean, let's say that you're getting 3-1. You're actually getting less than 3-1. You might be good here 1 out of 15 or 1 out of 20 times. You can't worry. Just get, it's just one of these things where even this one too, sometimes you have to walk off. I don't know if this one tilted you at all. Sometimes you have to walk off ones where, you make bad folds and stuff like that. But this one I wouldn't even really be too concerned about. It wouldn't really affect me because I know that I think I've made the right decision here. And it's
Yeah,
just,
I mean,
it's just like, when you lose with aces versus kings, or even worse, aces versus ace kings, sometimes it's going to happen, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I know that I'm almost always losing this pot, so I know I made a good fold, but at the same time it was, the big blind, his action is exactly what if the button wasn't behind me, I know for sure I was calling. And then I talked to the button after the hand, and he's like, yeah, I was basically basing my decision on your action. If you called, I was folding. If you folded, I would call.
Well, he can't call. He can't overcall if you call. No way. I mean, that would be, I mean, unless these guys are like the worst. I mean, the guys from New Hampshire are pretty far behind. But, yeah, that sucks. But again, I think that one of the good things about Crush Live Poker is I've seen just a lot of sort of these multi-way spots and in the tendencies at this level, and the tendencies haven't really changed all that much, especially when you're playing with recreational, the sort of poor players. I know for some reason humans just sort of fall back into these patterns, but dude, I wouldn't get too down on yourself there, Jonathan.
Yeah. So, I mean, the main points, I'm definitely not mad about the fold on the river. So turn raise, probably better off just calling, in your opinion.
I think it's a lot closer than people think. I think that the standard play is to call, but at the same time, I think that when you see somebody call with the naked ace of diamonds here, and I think that that same type of player is going to be calling with sets and two pair too, that I have no problem, raising as a prep to raise fold if something crazy happens behind you or if you get three bet. So I think you can make some of these non theoretical raises and spots when your opponents call too much and don't really bluff enough or aren't really coming back over the top of you without having it, which is again one of the comments I made about Garrett's game actually during the middle. I said it seems to me that Garrett overfolds the theory a lot, but he's exploiting, and it's the best way to win the money against these guys in those lineups.
Yeah. I
So
mean, they're paying him off way more than he's paying them off.
yeah, pretty much, pretty much. But thank you for the call. I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Mark. Appreciate it.
All right.